Great. Thank you so much. So welcome again, everybody. Along with this training, I've provided a number of different handouts. What we'll be focusing on primarily today for the first, probably majority of class, or at least the first 45 minutes, is the FDA guidance that came out. And with these materials, it's really looking at what does the FDA have to say as things change very, very quickly about how we should make our decisions in terms of critical trials, critical visits, what we can do, what's not reasonable, what to consider in terms of protocol deviations, what we can do remotely, and then even some considerations regarding informed consent. So this guidance document came out on mid-March and was already updated on April 2nd with some additional FAQs. So you do have that as a reference. We will also touch very, very briefly, again, just because we have such limited time today, on some of the EMA guidances. And mostly I just want you to know that they also are mirroring the FDA in terms of putting out documentation in terms of what we should consider. So for our global trials, everybody's being very, very consistent. I believe we even have an attendee here today from Japan. So just again, looking at how do we operate in this global environment with consistency to the protocols as written as much as possible, but really with the consideration of if we continue to conduct these clinical trials, we make the decision that they're significant, can we utilize that data given the changes we have to make to protect our investigators, our sites, our patients, our third-party providers? So what should we do and what do we have to do? So you do have these EMA guidances again as reference, so just feel free to peruse these on your own. At the end of today's presentations or at the end of the slides, there's a number of links that are utilized to pull the information, so you'll have all of that as well. So anything I touch on today, you can certainly review in more depth or send us further questions, and I'm happy to try and direct you to where the information is. I also provided an older guidance for you only because it is referenced by the FDA in their latest guidance in April, and this was the use of electronic informed consent questions and answers, something that's, again, not new, something that's been around for a while, since December 2016, but is really coming into play now in terms of how do we limit the number of visits to an office that a patient needs while we still ensure that we adhere to the basic core of good clinical practices, whether it be country-specific regulations, institutional regulations, or ICH GCP. So really considering, again, what can we do remotely? What can we do without physically seeing somebody or witnessing a signature that still protects their right, safety, and welfare? So a lot of that information is here in this electronic informed consent guidance. And then there's just, again, a few other references that I provided, just reminding us that we're not operating in a silo. I think at today's point, we all know that. We're inundated with news stories that are continually referencing the NIH, the CDC, the World Health Organization. Certainly, we're very well aware of the fact that different countries are handling this in different ways. But again, this just comes from the Health and Human Services, just as a reminder again that throughout all of this, we really consider that human rights come first and that we have to protect, again, all of our practitioners, but also the patients. So the NCI, National Cancer Institute, put out a number of different alternative suggestions in terms of how we manage minor and major protocol deviations. So I really found this a great reference. I think a number of you today do oncology trials or do immunotherapy type studies, tumor-based. So I think that a lot of this may be very relevant in terms of considerations for very, very specific handling of some of the endpoint decisions or endpoint data that you'll be collecting. And then here I just have, again, just another quick reminder or just reference for HIPAA, corona disease, the Human Health Services, and just a reminder that no patient should be left behind, that basic concept of we have to do everything we can to continually provide care to anybody who needs it. And again, I think this comes up in terms of clinical trials because there are some unfortunate instances where patients are really relying on these clinical trials as their primary health care. So just really considering, again, how does this come into play with COVID-19 testing? And, what do we do for patients who are tested positive in terms of making sure they do get the resources they need or are directed to where they can go? Just a wealth of references. Most of these we'll only be touching on very, very, very lightly today, given that we only have an hour and a half total for our session. So back to our primary topic. My name is Nikki Christensen. I've been in the industry for well over 25 years, just doing a number of different avenues in terms of starting out as a research coordinator, working with a large academic institution for a number of years on just a variety of clinical trials in that regard. A number of them were NIH-based, but also industry-based. Moved into being a CRA, a project manager, quality assurance auditor for a number of years, and still do quite a bit of that. I've worked on prepping both pre and post-audit responses, and also worked as a director of clinical operations, as well as a program leader in early phase oncology. I have published a few articles, worked on a number of journals, and helped put together some best practices research books as well. And then had the pleasure of being a speaker at a couple different associations. So our objectives today, to review the latest FDA guidance on COVID-19 and clinical trials, to discuss regulatory agency and IRB recommendations for handling study variances and safety management due to necessary deviations from approved protocols, and evaluate elements of risk management applications in clinical trials as applied to emerging changes in our society. So again, I'll be touching just a very high level on some recommendations that have come out from IRBs, just one or two slides on the EMA guidance, a few slides on what came out from the NIH, and also again from NCI. So just really looking at a few considerations for thought and application to the wide variety of clinical trials that we are conducting.